Welcome to Becoming is Messy, where we dive deep into the journey of survival, transformation, and everything in between. I'm your host, Megan Dawson, here to share the honest, unfiltered stories behind my own process of becoming. Life isn't a pretty and perfect straight line, and neither is becoming the person we're meant to be. Here, we embrace the ups, the downs, all the beautiful, chaotic, messy moments that shape who we are. Whether you're in the thick of change or reflecting on past transformations, this space is for real conversations about what it means to grow, stumble, and rise again. So get comfy, settle in, and let's get messy. Our guest for this episode is someone who knows firsthand what it means to face the unthinkable and choose to rise one step at a time. At just 14 years old, Nick Prefontaine suffered a traumatic snowboarding accident that left him in a coma. Doctors told his parents he'd likely never walk, talk, or eat on his own again. But Nick had other plans. He set a goal not just to walk, but to run out of the hospital. And he did. Fast forward to today, Nick is a top motivational speaker, named by Yahoo Finance no less, a 3-time best-selling author, and a 7-figure entrepreneur helping others navigate trauma and crisis through his unique STEP system. He's the founder and CEO of Common Goal and a partner in Smart Real Estate Coach, where he leads from a place of compassion, grit, and purpose. This conversation is going to explore not just the comeback, but the courage, clarity, and consistency it takes to build a thriving life after everything falls apart. Nick, welcome to Becoming is Messy.
So excited for this interview, and the title is fantastic. The title of your show, Becoming is Messy. Looking forward to the conversation from the moment I saw the title of your show. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm excited to have you here to help us set the stage for our chat. In just a few words, how would you describe this current season of your life?
this current season of my life, I would say I'd have to go with growth, expansion right now.
Growth and expansion right now, which seems a little bit of your backstory too. So walk us backwards. Every becoming story has a messy path with its own twists and turns. What are some of those twists and turns that brought you to today?
I'm so glad you asked the question, Megan. My story all starts when I was in 8th grade with my friends at ski clubs. My friends and I had all brought our snowboard gear onto the bus to get ready so we wouldn't miss a precious moment once we got to the mountain. And when we got to the mountain, the rest of the class migrated inside to get ready. Look, you will waste time. You will waste like 2 or 3 runs worth of time being there at ski club at the mountains. We got to the mountain and we headed right for the chairlift. So on the chairlift ride up, we noticed that it was a little icy because it had been raining earlier in the day, Megan, and the chairlift went right over the terrain park where all of the jumps were. And for those of you non-snowboarders or skiers, they have something called a terrain park with all kinds of jumps that you can go off of and do tricks and that kind of thing. It went right over that, and I knew as soon as I saw it that I had to go off the biggest jump in the terrain park. There wasn't even a moment in my mind of thinking, maybe I should be careful because it looks a little icy, or I don't know if I'm going to hit it. I was definitely hitting it.
I have teenagers, Nick, and I don't know if they have the ability to do that, right? To put that filter in and worry about that. So I can picture you at that age, ready to take that jump.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about. In my mind, I was already thinking what we were going to do after I landed that huge trick. Maybe grab a burger and fries in the lodge, or we could head over to the other chairlift for some runs on those trails. So I was just happy to be there. So I got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, and charged towards that jump with all my speed. And going up to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard on the snow going up the jump, and that kind of threw me off balance. That's the last thing that I remember. something that I learned later was that they wanted to bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital. And they couldn't because it was too windy. So they sent in an ambulance. And out of all the paramedics in the area in the county, there was only one who could intubate right on the spot. And I needed that to be able to breathe. And he was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. So there's always three things that I credit for being able to be here today with you and your listeners and to tell this story. That's the first one. The right paramedic showed up to the mountain. Something else I learned, the second one, was that even though I didn't have a helmet on, I had a pair of goggles. And for those of you that are not, actually, I know no one's seen the video portion of this right now. I was making a gesture. I wore a pair of goggles on my head, and that was to over my eyes to block if it was bad conditions and everything like that. So the only protection I had was my goggles. So the goggles that I wore were very thick with a lot of padding. And not only did they brace my initial fall, as I continued to roll down the mountain and continued to hit my head, I learned later that they moved. As I continued to roll, they moved and cushioned each blow as I rolled down the mountain. Pretty amazing. I wore some pretty big goggles with a lot of padding. I never would have fathomed that I would need them to brace my fall. And the school had to get in touch with my parents and have them meet me at the hospital. So all they knew was that I'd been in an accident. And my dad was the one that they were able to reach first. When he called my mom, he also wasn't able to reach her. So he just left her a message, a quick message. As soon as he hung up, he realized that the message would probably panic her. So he called back and deleted it. So when they got to the hospital, they were totally shocked to see how rough of a shape I was in. My head and shoulder, where I made the initial impact, were bruised beyond comprehension. And the doctors actually had to drill a hole for a shunt to be inserted into my brain to relieve the pressure. And without it, the pressure could have gone up and I would have died. So the doctors at this point, they were just doing their job. So they tried to, the only people that were allowed to see me were my parents at that point because of the severity of my injury. And in my room, the doctors just came right into my room to share the not so good news, not so good news, not so good news. As I'm sure you can imagine, if you or anyone you know has ever been in a traumatic injury or an acute situation, the doctors can't paint rosy scenarios. For liability reasons, they have to give you the worst case scenario. My mom stopped him, and this is up until last year. I used to always say my parents stopped them from talking in front of me, but my dad heard me say this. I was on his show last year, and he goes, no, not, it wasn't me. It was your mom. I'm not going to take credit for that. She stopped them and she said, no, not in front of him, because she understood that even though I was in a coma, I was still taking in information. So she made the doctors step outside my room. And then once they were there, they said that I probably wasn't going to be able to walk, talk, or eat on my own ever again. And even if I was able to come out of the coma, so they weren't even sure how long I was going to be in the coma, but if I was able to come out, there was a good chance that I was going to need 24-hour care for the rest of my life. And to my parents' credit, because none of this got through to me, whether unconsciously or subconsciously, it didn't get through to my mind. So I had no idea about this. To their credit, they didn't treat it like a death sentence like so many people do in this situation. They took the information, thanked the doctors, and then this allowed me to treat it like any other situation. This is no different than any other challenge that I had faced up to this point in my life. So I ended up being in the coma for 3 weeks. I really don't remember a month because, as I mentioned, it was a partially induced coma. They had to wait until the swelling came down in my brain. before bringing me out of the coma. I don't remember a month. And then it was after a month, I was transported to so that was the third thing right there. My parents didn't let that negative information get to me. Yep.
Just the visual of the goggles and the safety that they provided and just giving you that little bit of a buffer. That's just a powerful image. And then just the insight of your mom, there's studies that have shown just the importance of positivity and willpower, you know, in the body's ability to heal. Just that belief that you can is sometimes what they think is the reason you do. And so, you know, your mom's insights in that moment to not allow the doomsday of the fact get to you, which I think was a really special part in that moment. And so now bring us to when you work consciously aware. Do you have some blips of memories of when you started to realize and started to wake up and understand the gravity of your situation in some way?
Yeah, so I've talked about this a lot. I've talked about this with on shows that I'm on, different shows that I'm on. I've been like drilling down into this aspect of my story pretty often, and that's so I didn't really have those memories for took my memories started in early March, like a month after my accident, because I was slowly they were taking me off of all the drugs and medication. So I was originally transported to the third floor at this rehab hospital in Boston. And there was only 3 floors, but I was originally transported to the third floor, and that was reserved for the most critical of cases. And my memories from that time are very like a very touch and go, very vague. I don't really remember. There's no vivid conscious memories from when I was on the third floor. That was reserved for the most critical of cases. It would take me to sit up in bed for 8 minutes at a time. It would take 3 nurses to support me, and even then I would be sweating profusely like I just ran a marathon. I had lost over 20 pounds. So when I got in the accident, I was being in a coma and only being fed through a tube. When I got in the accident, I was about 160 pounds, and I had dropped below 140 after being in the coma and being fed through a tube for a month. I was pretty weak at that point. It started out with a fully supported wheelchair. Then I graduated from there to just a regular wheelchair, and all on the way, it was definitely steps every day towards that to get my strength back. My real conscious memories that I can speak of is after I was transported to the second floor. And that's where really all my memories really come back. That's when they really start. And there were long days for me. I would start out by having my occupational therapist teach me how to shower again. Because if you think of it, I had lost everything. So it was basically like I was a 14-year-old baby, for lack of a better term. I had to learn everything all over again. Even so simple as, okay, you do the water before you do the soap. Like little things like that, people don't think of that you have to learn. Like I had to learn all over again, little things like that. So then I would get dressed and have breakfast, and after that, this is just like one day example. After that, I would have sessions of physical, occupational, and speech therapy, and then after which you broke for lunch. And I can remember, and this was around the same time, early on in my recovery, that on one of these lunch breaks. So for lunch, I would always go back to my room and we would just rest there, and I'd be able to eat and then just whatever for that hour, just rest. And I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was in a wheelchair still, and I was just looking over my situation, Megan. I just couldn't really figure it out. I can remember looking and turning to my mom, who was part of my support. She was with me during every day, going to every therapy and doctor's appointment with me. But I remember turning to her and asking, I was looking over being in a wheelchair and everything, and I said, am I ever going to be able to walk again? And she didn't, to her credit, she didn't hesitate. She, not at all. She said, yeah, of course you are. That's what we're doing here. So you can get everything back and we can go home. So this allowed me to keep moving forward, even though I had that moment of doubt. After that therapy, and that's really in that experience, my snowboarding accident, that's the only real moment of doubt that I had and that I can consciously remember. And then from the entire experience, I never remember there being any pain. Because I think my nature of like how I approach everything is like, how is this funny? Like, what, yeah. So what is funny about this? Like, that I see the world through that lens. And I think, by doing that, I'm able to I don't remember any pain. And that was probably because of that combination of that. And then my parents constantly surrounded me with positivity. And like, for instance, there was affirmations all over my room. So even before I could walk, I would look on one wall and it would say, with each step I take, I'm getting closer and closer to accomplishing my goal. And then another wall, and then like versions of that same quote throughout my room. This even before I could walk. And like with each day I'm getting stronger and stronger, like little things like that. And it wasn't like I could get away from it, so they constantly surrounded me with it. And then it was right around this time when I was transported to the second floor, the rehab hospital, that I started to unknowingly use a system to not only make a full recovery but run out of the hospital. And the differentiation there is interesting because I can remember it was early on in my recovery. I was still in a wheelchair, and I can remember overhearing my parents say, meeting with my team of doctors and therapists, and they were saying, okay, what do we have to do to make sure Nick makes a full recovery? I heard in my head, on the back of my head, you're going to run out. Then I was able to communicate that because if you remember, I had to learn how to talk again as well. When it first started the communication, I started out by just making eye contact and like blinks. Then it was mouthing words and whispers. But so I was able to communicate that to the rest of the team. And that my team was I started out unknowingly to utilize a system to, yeah, and that's a STEP system. So STEP is an acronym, stands for support. So make sure you have the support of your family and friends right from the beginning. And this is going to have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. T is trust. And what I'll do is just give your listeners and you a 10,000-foot view. And then if they're interested in downloading the whole STEP system, I can give them a way they can do that at the end.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I was also going to say too, like I can in follow up, I'll post with this episode if there's any video accompanying it. So if there's things we don't go as deep in today, I know I had the privilege of watching some of your videos, so I'll put some links out there too, so folks can follow up.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So C is trust. So trust that once you take your first step, your next step's always going to be available to you. And this also starts by trusting that voice that we all have inside of ourselves, and you have to follow it. E is energy. Maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. So medication has the potential to get in the way of that. The thing with this, and I always like to share this story, is that after I was transported to the rehab hospital, before I was cleared to walk, so I wasn't cleared to walk on my own, I would always, if I got up in the middle of the night, I would need help with whoever was staying with me. It would usually be my dad, or if he couldn't be there, an uncle or my grandfather would always have to help me to the bathroom because I wasn't cleared yet. And I can remember that I woke up in the middle of the night and I had to go to the bathroom, and I couldn't get, I think it was my grandfather at that time. I couldn't get his attention because I wasn't able to raise my voice or anything. So I managed to put the bar down to the bed and get to the bathroom and come back. Nothing happened. However, the hospital found out the next day and they freaked out oh no, we can't have that and liability. And we're going to give him this many cc's of this medication, that many cc's of this other medication. And that should calm him down so he's able to sleep through the night. And my mom heard this and she goes, no, you're not. Ask him not to do that. They asked me not to do that and nothing ever happened. But if she wasn't there to advocate for me, be my advocate, they would have just gave me a little something, if you will, to make their jobs easier. Uh,
Oh my gosh, Nick, I just had a synergy with you because I've been in the hospital a ton of times with all of my medical trauma. And I always joke, as don't get me wrong, the doctors and nurses in my life I have such respect for. They've been a very critical part of my journey. But I do joke because I always say during the day, I feel like they would drug me up so I couldn't do the kind of energy work that you're talking about in your body. And then at night, when I wanted to sleep, they wake me up every second checking my vitals. And I'm like, I'm actually sleeping. Like, what? I feel like I don't understand. I feel like there should be some different protocol when patients are getting rest to let them get rest at night. I'm not the hospital administrator, so I don't get to decide that.
I feel bad almost saying that every time because I'm like, look, listen,
Yeah,
they're doctors and
of
nurses.
course.
They're doing the best they
Of
can with
course.
what they
Yes.
have. And
Agreed.
I get that,
Yes. Yeah.
but you have to, there's a line that you have to draw that you have to advocate for yourself
Yes.
because if you
Yep.
don't, they're just going to treat you like another, like a
Yes, I
number.
think that's another good point. I
Um,
feel just to emphasize that, I think is it's so important that
yeah,
when I hear the stories of your mom, here you are at 14, so having somebody advocate for you, and I just think that I view us and our parents as part of the medical team, and it's our body. So yeah, make sure you're advocating for yourself when you're in these situations. Yeah.
absolutely.
So energy's
So just
E.
to
Bring
finish
us to
it,
P.
yeah, I was going to say to finish it, to
You bring it home
home,
to P. Persist.
P is
Hmm.
persistent. So persistence. Once you take your first step, keep getting up every
Yep.
day and taking your next
Yep.
step, no matter how small. And by continuing to move forward every day, you are building an unstoppable momentum. So if you fast forward less than 60 days later after being transported to the rehab hospital, I realized my goal of running out of the
Wow.
hospital. And after running out of the hospital, though, it wasn't like, all right, I'm all set now.
Right.
I can just return to my life. And I still had a lot. There was a lot to do. There was a lot of work left to do. So I had to, from when I got home, I had to go to outpatient therapy for another 6 months. And that was physical, same thing, physical, occupational, and speech therapy. Although not double sessions like I had when I was in the hospital, just once a day, like during the week. And I also had to be tutored all summer long in order to continue on to high school with the rest of my classmates. And the school were very
Yeah.
supportive and very accommodating. They said, "Oh no, you got in your accident, and we know you need to rest and recover. Why don't you take the summer off, the rest of the year and the summer off, then you can do eighth grade again next year." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Ugh." I don't want to do
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
There was really that year. There was really no summer. It was just constantly
wow.
because I had missed all that time being in the hospital. So I had to go to get tutored all summer long.
Wow. Wait, so
And then
Nick, so are you saying that so it was eighth grade when you had your accident? In eighth grade, you had to relearn all of those basic things that you mentioned. And then also you ended up finishing eighth grade on time? Is that true?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
I like
Yeah, of course.
graduated with
Yeah.
my eighth grade class. And I that was actually one of the first talks that I gave in front of
Yeah.
people because they asked me
Oh,
to say a few words. So that was one of my first ones. I remember it was in the auditorium. I still
mhm.
remember that. That was one of the first times I spoke about my experience in front of people. And the rest of my class was celebrating. Oh, great! We can like have a
Yeah.
summer and go and relax. And I was like,
Uh,
okay, tutored all summer
yeah.
long. It's okay, but
Yeah, yeah, no,
that
that's amazing. Is what, yeah, so very cool.
thank you. The
You're welcome. Hey Messies, just popping in with a quick reminder. If you're finding this episode right in the middle of your own messy season, I want you to know you are not alone. This Becoming is Messy podcast was created for exactly these moments. The ones that test your strength, stretch your patience, and remind you just how resilient you are. If you're new here, I'd love for you to check out some of our earlier episodes, where I share parts of my own healing journey and talk with other guests about what it really means to rebuild, redefine, and rise on your own terms. If this podcast has resonated with you in any way, if you've laughed, cried, or maybe felt a little less alone in your own becoming, it would mean so much to me if you would just take a moment to rate and review Becoming is Messy on your favorite platform. It helps more people find these conversations, especially those who might really need it right now. Okay, back to the show.
It's always to retell this. It's always because it's a little surreal to me that only 18 months later, after finishing my rehab from my snowboarding accident, I got my start in real estate, and I was door knocking pre-foreclosure doors. So the reason why I say it's always surreal to me is because I'm sure you can relate. When you're younger, time is compressed. So
Right.
something like 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, even 24 months seems like a lifetime away.
Yes.
However,
So
it's
true.
not really
It's right.
the older I get,
Yeah.
it's not the more I learn, it's not really that much time.
No, definitely.
Even though we just got through this the whole COVID time warp,
Yep.
that aside, I can say that's not really that much time. I mean, my right around the time when I was getting my driver's license, my dad had a real estate investment company, and they were playing with the idea of having someone, a bird dog, if you will, go and knock on these doors of the people that have received the notice of default letter from the bank, meaning that they had missed several payments on their home and the bank still hadn't foreclosed. The training that I got was just here's where you go, here's the website where you go find them, here's a script of what you say if they answer the door, and then here's a leave behind that you print out. If they're not home, you can just leave at the door. Other than that, I didn't really get any hands-on training, so I tried it at first, and I would go to areas of cities where probably not the best areas to buy properties, but I didn't know that. I just wanted to get the most amount of reps in that I could a day. So I would go to these areas where they were right next door to each other. And I get a lot of doors slammed in my face. And that was my first sales experience, if you will. And I always point back to it now. It's the best teacher, I think, like door to door sales. And right after that, my cousin Mike and my dad flew us out to California to shadow the number one person in the country that was having success with these notice of default doors. Then once I saw how his approach differed from mine and how like rehearsed and dialed in and nuanced it was, I changed my approach and started seeing success when I got back home to the East Coast. And I continued doing that throughout high school. We bought several homes in that city, in those cities that I used to do doors in, and owned them for years after I even graduated high school. So I know it was a success for the company. And then after real estate, after high school, excuse me, I started studying and I got my real estate license. So I was helping buyers and sellers, and I got my real estate license in March of 2008. I know what you're thinking if you were around. Great time to get your real estate. However, I didn't know any different. I was just that was the market to me. I remember everyone was complaining. All my peers were complaining. Oh, it's not what it used to be, and it used to be so easy. But I didn't know any different. So I was able to support myself, and with a few transactions a month, for instance, and I was set up. I felt like I was doing good. So I
But you had survived worse before, right?
yeah,
You could get bad. You could survive in a and thrive in a rough housing market, right?
yeah, exactly. So I had actually in 2012, and if you'll have me back, what I can do is go into depth on this
Of course.
because there's so many levels to this. But in
Mm-hmm.
2012, I developed a voice issue, and that was from me trying to pump myself up before I prospected and got on the phone and everything.
Yep.
It almost, it had like tension. It sounded like it was hard to get the words out. That's how it sounded
Oh
all the
yeah.
time.
Oh
So
wow.
I actually wound up in a voice specialist office in March of 2013. To skip ahead all the
Yeah.
details and
Wow.
everything, and I started getting Botox injections into my vocal folds, along with their higher level speech therapists to train my muscles back to how they were before I developed any issues. So
Mm.
being in real estate, being a realtor, when I was still a realtor, my dad at the end of 2014, he approached me. He was buying homes at that point. He had started to buy them creatively. So without using any of his cash or big investor payments or sign personally on loans like he used to before the housing market crashed. So he was buying all these properties conventionally, non-conventionally, and a few of the ways that we buy, and you'll see how this all fits together. Just to keep it real simple, a few of the ways that we buy
Yeah.
is on a lease purchase, like a rent to own,
Yep.
basically a delayed cash sale. Then another option is we'll actually close on the home subject to the seller's existing loan. And then a third option, if they don't have any debt on the property, is we'll close on it and then make them principal only payments. Those are just to keep it real simple and high level. That's like how he was buying and how we continue to buy to this day. However we are buying, we're always selling them on a rent to own to the rent to own market. So there's only roughly 18% of the market of buyers out there who can walk into a bank and get a loan.
Mm.
We're selling the house and marketing the house to the other bigger portion of the market, the
Yep.
other 80% of the market who, for whatever reason, there's a number of different reasons, can't walk into a bank and get a loan today. He approached me in 2014, at the end of 2014, when I still had my real estate license, and said he needed help with putting these on the rent to own market and
Mm-hmm.
not listing them as a realtor, but putting them on the rent to own market for rent to own
Yep.
buyers. And
Yep.
I was hesitant at first. I was like, no, I got my own thing going on over here.
Yeah.
I don't need any help. Luckily, he asked me more than once. And Megan, I started working with him at the end of 2014. Over the course of 13, 14 months, my income shifted where I was only making maybe 10 or 20% of my income as a realtor at that point by January of 2016. And it didn't even make any sense for me to keep my real estate license anymore.
Wow.
So in January, I let it go. The marketing the homes turned into, oh, shoot, we need someone to field all these buyer
Yep.
calls and inquiries. And then that turned into coming up with a process that we have to put the buyers to make sure that they're successful. They get to the end of their rental and deal and they're able
Yep.
to qualify for their own loan and officially move forward with the purchase. So that whole thing turned into we still buy and sell properties ourselves, but we started holding events. Probably in 2016 was our first event. And that's to teach the same systems, tools, and processes that we've used that have been successful for us and our family business with associates that we have all over the country. At those events, I've always had the opportunity to be able to do like I'm doing today and tell my story.
Mm-hmm.
So I always thought that I was scratching that itch, if you will.
Yep.
ever since I've graduated from school, I've always had this voice in the back of my head that's always been telling me, yeah, great, Nick. But what you really need to be doing is telling your story from stage and helping trauma survivors thrive, like through their trauma and
Yes.
thrive with the rest of their lives. By sharing my story at our events once or twice a year since 2016, I've always thought, yeah, okay, I'm doing that.
Yeah,
Like,
yes, that's right.
I'm satisfying it. Not really. In an aspect, I was like there was a
Yeah.
piece of it that I was satisfying. However, not completely. Someone that saw me speak at one of our events, and I'm actually, why don't, this is a perfect, before I tell this part of the story, why don't I take
Yeah.
a break and see if you have any questions so I'm not black.
Yeah, no, I just had an observation really at this point, not necessarily a question. It's just, I love examples like yours that so strongly paint the picture of how our lives build upon all of our experiences add up to the moment that we're in. So I feel like if you looked back at your life 10 years ago, whatever that moment that you were in, you wouldn't have seen all the ways that moment in time would have connected out to where you are now. Like you, even your comment about how you were telling your story, but not really. But at the end of the day, that was still preparing you where you were heading. But it's like all of those pieces. I love the whole, I've heard leaders of very big companies or politicians. I've heard a comment that says, are you prepared for this moment? And it's, yeah, of course I'm prepared for this moment because everything before this moment added up to prepare me for this moment. So, of course, I'm prepared for this moment. And I feel like your story paints that picture, even though individual pieces don't necessarily seem directly connected
Mm,
until you tell the whole
yeah,
story.
I
Yeah. So
feel they
I
are.
find that, I just
Yeah,
find that fascinating. Right? All of those are needed
yeah,
for to get you to where you
100%,
are. I
100%.
think that's
So,
neat. Yeah, yeah. So I didn't know. I was even intrigued because I'm thinking of your STEP program, so maybe that is a question that I feel like formulated by my commentary, but the back to step, just thinking now as you're getting that inspiration to really leverage your store more for people that are in trauma experiences and have been through that. What did it look like? How did it all start coming together for you to bring that forward again and actually use that system and really kind of shift over more to that kind of speaking coaching business for that audience?
yeah, so excited to share this aspect of my story.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you that voice the voice challenge that I had, I dealt with it for I had to receive Botox injections for 7 years. However,
Wow.
I dealt with it because I first started dealing with it in 2012. I dealt with it from 2012 to 2020. Someone that actually saw me speak and tell my story at our QLS live event, and that's every year in September, October timeframe. In 2019, I was still going through the final throes of my voice issue. She approached me, so that point was the longest that I had spoke before in
Mhm.
front of an audience, and I was still dealing with voice challenges at that point. I was in the final throes of my voice issue. It was tight. And you could hear that. And I remember this woman approached me after hearing me share my talk, and she said, she complimented me on it and said, if you're ever looking, and that was the longest I'd spoke, that was maybe 15 or 20 minutes. She said, if you're ever looking to fine tune your message and bring it to another level so that you're able to have maximum impact, I can introduce you to a few coaches and mentors that have helped me along the way. So I wasn't ready yet. However, I always
Mhm.
hung on to her card because I knew that was a path that I was destined for, if you will. I knew that
Yeah.
was in my future. I still had to figure this out, the voice thing out. Like I was still dealing with it a little bit. So I always held on to her card. And I held on to her card until April and May of 2021 when the voices in my head finally just I couldn't take it anymore. Like
Yes.
I had to take some action. So I reached out to her. she introduced me to one of her coaches and mentors who became my mentor, Trisha Brooke. And I shared what I was looking to do with Trisha. I said, "Do you think that's possible?" She said, "Yes, absolutely." I said, "All right, what do you recommend I do?" She said, "The speaker salon." And I said, "Tell me about that. What's that?" And she said, "That's $25,000, and that's you commute to New York City for 6 weeks in a row. And for the final week, you get to perform on stage at the Triad Theater with up to 10 other speakers, 10 or 15 other speakers, and share your talk that you work on crafting with me, live feedback and direction and stage direction in real time. You work on that for those first 5 weeks, and you perform it for TEDx people that book
Hmm.
TED speakers, event organizers, podcast hosts, all different kinds of people like that. You get to perform it for them. So I said yes, was able to cobble that together, those funds, and sent her the money. Then halfway through the speaker salon, about midway through, in the fall of 2021, she pitched the idea of what it would look like to work with her one-on-one. And she told me she specializes in working with speakers to help them build out their speaker platform. Megan, I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah,
I didn't know what a
that's
speaker
cool.
platform
That
was.
is cool.
Uh,
Yes, that is
I
awesome.
just knew I wanted more of her, just her
Yeah,
brain and everything. I
so
was
cool.
impressed by it. She said, "That's 75,000." I said, "I don't have that underneath my mattress, but if you give me a week, I'll figure it out and I'll come up with it, but you have to give me a week." So she did, and 6 days later, I went and applied for financing, and 6 days later, I sent her the money. I got approved for financing, sent her the funds, and then started working with her in the first January to the end of July of 2022. And the reason why I share that, it answers your question that you asked me earlier indirectly, because before Trisha, I maybe had spoke for 15 or 20 minutes
Yep,
max. That was
yep.
it. There was no step system. None of that existed. It was all in my head. It's always how I've dealt with things and how I was raised, how my family overcomes things, like how it was instilled in me. Working with Trisha, she helped me launch, as you can see over my shoulder, my
Yeah, yep.
company Common Goal, and come up with the mission and everything like that. After Trisha, I now give 50 and 60-minute keynotes to brain injury associations and other organizations that support individuals that are going through trauma. And also that I'm starting to work one-on-one with people as well and branch out, not just to brain injury, but
Mm.
to help everyone that fits within that criteria. However, prior to Trisha, like none of that existed. Common Goal, the step system, my keynotes, none of that existed. I'm just so glad that I did. I didn't want to live my life and think, "Oh, I really could have done that." I just there was no way I was not doing it, if that makes sense. Double negative.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad that you shared that piece of your story because I think that it's not always told, a highlight of the people that help us. And here you are with that voice inside getting louder and louder, telling you to do something, and you can know it so deeply in your gut, but sometimes the fear holds us back because we don't know how to do it. It can feel so big, and so then some of us may never do it, but instead being able to say, I'm going to do it, but that doesn't mean without resources. It doesn't mean I'm not going to ask for help or find the people that are experts at it and leverage a team. You just don't have to do it all alone. There are resources to help you bring to life what your calling is. I think that's a really cool
So
point.
absolutely, and I think just a couple of things, if I could add on to that. The
Yeah, of course.
so really, this is something that I believe is that as long as I'm following that voice in the back of my head, and we all have it, most of us will
Yep.
explain it away and say, "Oh no, that's not rational, that's not realistic," who would ever, eh,
Yep.
and beat yourself up about it. But as long as I'm listening to that guidance and listening to that voice, I know for me that God or the universe or whatever you believe, a higher power, anything. I don't want to alienate anyone by saying that, but I
Yep.
believe
Agree.
that you'll
Yeah.
be taken care of. Like as long as you're listening
Yep.
to that
I do
voice,
too.
you'll be taken care of. And your number one
Yep.
job is just to tune in and listen to that voice.
Yep. Yep. That's so true. I echo that. It's very much what drives me in life and following that. And sometimes it's remembering somebody that gave you a business card and reaching out to them and leaning on them for help. It's because I feel like that comes to us sometimes too. 100% agree for sure. You mentioned that your audience is expanding a bit. You're not necessarily just speaking to those who have had brain injuries as well. But I am curious, as you started at first connecting a little bit with that, with an audience that had maybe some similar journey as you, and how that experience for you, just to me as an observer, that sounds like such a rewarding experience to get to be able to bring your experience to folks that maybe on their own struggles with their own journey with that, and maybe a few years ahead they're behind you a bit. And how has seeing kind of the step approach help others? What has that meant to you?
So I would say before I did this current work that I'm doing with like proactively reaching out to
Mm-hmm.
brain injury associations and everything, I think it was shortly after I graduated from high school, I spoke at the Brain Injury Association of Rhode Island, and I live in Rhode Island. I live in Newport, Rhode Island. So that was one of the first places that I reached out to say, hey, I think I'd be a good speaker. I had a brain injury, like that kind of thing. And this is before I developed anything. I think it
Yeah.
was, I spoke at their
Yeah.
event. I think it was maybe 5 or 10 minutes. It wasn't much. And I don't know, I really didn't, where I, yeah, I really didn't like the messaging and everything. It just wasn't hitting at that point. And it just,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I knew in my soul that I would always have my story to
Yep.
follow at that point. I felt, oh, okay, I need some life experience, if you will.
Yeah.
So reaching out to people like that, the Brain Injury Association, recently, and I can say within the last 5 years, because within the
Yeah.
last 3 years, I started to proactively do that because a coach told me that, oh, you should start coming up with a list of brain injury associations and then just
Mm-hmm.
reach out to them several times a year to see how you can help them and how you can be of service to them. And I started doing that. And I think that's where really the rewarding work comes in because sharing my message to them, like some of the stories that I hear, I was I was at a different place in my life the first time I did it back
Mm-hmm.
in 2009. But now that I'm sharing this message and that I have it dialed in, whereas I'm not thinking about, oh shoot, what am I going to say? It's already memorized. It already comes out. I can just be there with the audience. The stories, Megan, that I hear from people that approach me after hearing my keynote, it's just, oh my God, they tell me exactly what they're going through with brain injury. And
Yeah.
it's every event that I speak at for brain injury, it's like, because I always take part in the sessions before I speak, just to get in the mode and get in the flavor of the event and to make sure I call back to certain things. And every event, I'm like blown away. I'm like, oh, these are my people. I'm in the
Yes.
right spot. I'm really in the right spot. And the feedback after I talk
Mm.
from people is okay. Like it's reaffirming to me that I'm
Yes.
helping them through whatever they're going through with the step system and by sharing my experience.
Isn't it neat? You and I talked before the show about just the energy you feel one on one on podcasts, and the different energy that exists between speakers and guests. And I think it's so cool, the energy you feel in a room like you're describing. Like I feel like I've been on stages where it's electric in the room and you just feel, wow, this is a very meant to be moment. And there's other times where it just maybe feels a little bit off. And it could be the same speech, it could be everything else the same, but there's just some audiences where it really feels this is my audience and this is meant to be. And we're meant to share something together here. And I think those feel like magic to me. So very cool. I'm so glad you get to do that within that audience specifically, because to me, I think we all of us in the midst of struggle, we need some hope and we need to hear some success stories just to have something to strive for and know that there's an other side to what we're going through. And it's really cool that you get to give that to people.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're getting, go ahead. Did you have something to say?
I was just going to say I'm blessed to be where I am, and I'm so happy I made that decision because I can't imagine my life without having made it.
Yeah. I want to go back and watch your eighth grade speech. I think that to me must just so neat to me to think that before coaching, before the speaker session and training, everything, but just in the midst of healing, that you were able to talk to your classmates and parents. To me, that's a very insightful peek at where you'd eventually be heading. So I don't think everybody could have done that. So that's very cool.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
don't even know if that's recorded.
Yeah.
I'll have to
It's
dig it
just
up.
cool. That's a neat part of your story. I'm going to add that to your bio next time. And Nick from his memorable keynote in the eighth grade till now. We're nearing our end. We have a few more questions left. This next one is it's a segment I call Rapid Reel. And it's just no overthinking, just some quick, fun questions. Just listen to your gut and say what comes to mind. Sound good to you?
Sounds great.
All right. So, what's your guilty pleasure TV show or movie that totally ruins your street cred?
I would say, I don't know, just because I just watched it, The Last of Us on HBO.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I love the show.
I wouldn't say that ruins my. I don't have one on the tip of my tongue. It would take me a while to think about it. I'm sure I could find out one that'd be like interesting, but I just that's off the top.
What's one thing that you used to believe about yourself that you no longer do?
Sure, and this goes right along with what we talked about today. So can only be I can only make a living and support myself with real estate, and not by following my calling, by following my passion. That's changed now. That I don't
Mm,
believe that, but I used to. That's why I stayed.
yes.
That's
Yep.
why I stuck with. Okay, I
Yes.
have to do this. I
Yep.
have to get my real estate license. I have to become a realtor.
All right. What's an example of a hype song you go to when you need to rally yourself up?
I'm bad at this. Well, I mean, my songs on there. I don't really download. I'll give you a genre.
Yeah, give us
So
a genre.
I like electronic dance music,
Yeah,
like
yes.
techno, that kind
All
of thing.
right. All right.
That
Yeah, that gets you
gets me
going.
going. Yeah,
That's
I don't,
good.
and I actually do the opposite thing before I speak. I try to just calm myself down
Yeah,
and
chill,
yeah,
quiet.
yeah. Definitely don't want to get hyped up. I have
Okay, there you go. That's a
going
good
on,
tip.
enough adrenaline going on and everything.
Yes, that's true. I can relate to that. All right, here's an easy one. Stress snacking, sweet, salty, or spicy?
Okay, so I'm gonna go with A and B. I'm not a spicy person, but sweet and salty. I could go with either depending on
Okay.
what day, what mood I'm in.
Okay, but sweet and salty.
Yeah, I could do that.
What about both together, like a caramel popcorn or something?
Yeah. I actually like if I'm doing something, I want to like commit to it. So I think either I like sweet, I like salty.
Yeah, maybe. All right, or
I mean,
separate. Okay, all right,
they'd be
all right.
fine
We're
together,
getting.
but I was thinking of them both separately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, the separate. You're picturing them separate. Okay. All right. We're getting to know you. Yeah. All right. Last one. What is your current definition of success?
Waking up every day and being able to do what I want to do and control my time, which I feel like that's what I'm doing. I feel like I'm doing that today. I'm
Hmm.
feeling like I'm doing exactly what I want to do, which is both
Yes.
my speaking and I'm still involved in
Yeah.
family real estate business. And really, big reason why still involved in family real estate business is because I just love working like with my
That's
family. I
awesome.
love working with
Yeah,
my
that's
dad and
great.
being able to, hey, like he was in the office today. I was like, we had lunch
That's cool.
together. Like
Oh, it's so nice.
I like that. I
Yes.
like it's not like I love real estate, man.
No, but the work you were doing with the people you're doing it with, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's
So
awesome.
it's being able to work with my dad, I would say.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I have one final question, but before we get to that, if you could just let folks know how to connect with you, and I'll just caveat, I will add a link to your website and any links that you'd like me to, you can send my way afterwards and I can include when we promote the episode. But while I have you and folks are listening, how would you like folks to connect with you?
Sure. So a few things. We went over a lot
Yeah.
today. If anything about my story and the real estate aspect of it, like how we buy and sell homes, we like to call it on terms, and then sell to rent home buyers, resonated with anyone, you can check out our website, smartrealestatecoach.com. And if you scroll down, you can get registered for the free master's class. And that's going to teach you all about how we buy and sell on terms. And if by the end of that master's class, you're like it, you find out it's for you, you'll be able to take your next step and go forward at that point. And then if anything, we only went over like a 10,000 foot view of the step system. If you want to download the entire step system for free, go to nickprefontaine.com/step. And you're going to learn all about support, trust, energy, and persistence. And especially if you're stuck and you just don't know what to do with your situation and your life, it's a great first step, because once you take your first step, there will always be a next step.
So true. All right. So, final question. There's some listeners right now that are actually in what feels like a rock bottom in their lives and wondering, when you were at that point in your own life, what's a piece of advice that you wish could have found you sooner?
Keep going.
All right, Nick, it was a pleasure to have you. It was so nice chatting. Thank you for joining us on Becoming is Messy. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, me too. This has been fun.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Before we wrap today, I want to invite you to be part of the Becoming is Messy community. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And if there's anything that resonates with you, please leave a review. Your feedback means the world to me, and it helps other people find this community. Follow me on social media. I'd love to hear your ideas for future topics, your questions, and stories from your own messy moments. And if you're feeling inspired, check out the Becoming is Messy shop, where you can grab a mug, a t-shirt, or something else that reminds you to embrace your messy magic every single day. A huge thank you to the incredible Wolves and Sheep for providing the music for Becoming is Messy. Check them out on your favorite music streaming platform. As we close out today's episode, remember this: messy is just another word for growing. So keep showing up, keep laughing, and keep making beautifully awkward progress. Until next time, stay messy, my friends.